My name is Donovan O'Brien, and I'm using Screencastify to provide my presentation in video format for the discussion thread on which philosopher I um, actually find most interesting to me. And I selected William Chandler Bagley. Now, you might want to ask, well, why did I pick him? Well, he was born in 1874 and, was a child of the Midwest, grew up in Michigan, and eventually would attend the university or Michigan State University, which actually started as an agricultural school. So the idea was that most of the college graduates from this university would go back to work on their family's farms. Uh, Bagley didn't have that option as his father was a administrator of a hospital. So there really was no family business for which he could return to with his education. Instead, he looked at being a teacher. And interestingly, he ended up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where he began teaching in a one-room schoolhouse, which, as you can imagine, would be pretty difficult for any new teacher. And in particular, I kind of a little, thinking back, a little nostalgia to Little House on the Prairie and the idea of all the children of Walnut Grove, all going to one schoolhouse with children from varying ages and abilities, all in that one classroom setting. So you can imagine it had to be very daunting to teach children in that kind of environment when we consider the challenges we face in classrooms today in terms of different reading levels. But here, Bagley went in and kind of saw, as the teacher, I've got to make this work. I've got to figure out how it is I'm going to reach all these kids. And I think that really bodes well to his philosophical approach, which is essentialism. Basically, these experiences help to drive his thoughts about how to get kids engaged, as well as what was the important curriculum, what were the important skills that each child should be able to develop and carry on for them to have more success in the future. Essentialism actually mandates that these common pieces have to be in place, not just because it's good instruction, but also it is the foundation of supporting our democracy. In Gutek on page 378, it's summarized as this educational philosophy of this essentialism is the transmitter of our cultural heritage, guaranteeing the continuance of civilized society. So there's a far more overreaching philosophical approach to essentialism as providing these foundational pieces for society. Another important aspect was teacher preparation. In 1927, he wrote that teachers needed to be generously equipped to do the fundamental work of instructing students. Every child had to have a good and competent teacher in their classroom. Not only did essentialists want teachers to have the content knowledge, they needed a good understanding of human development and pedagogy. Bagley would also convey the need for student teaching. In fact, that was one of the things that he was most known for at the Columbia Teaching College was the idea that we really had to mentor new teachers. They had to get some of those experiences under the guidance of a master teacher. I think his experiences in the one-room schoolhouse where he pretty much flew solo really helped to develop him as a somebody who was thoughtful about the processes and how teachers learn and become good, competent teachers in what they are doing. Now, stability through equity. Dr. Branch gave me some feedback on my annotated bibliography when she asked, what do I mean by stable curriculum? It's a really good question, as I didn't define it very well, even though I had my kind of own ideas about what it was. Essentialists would define this as a curriculum that is easily understood and includes the important takeaways of the course. What is the minimum threshold of content knowledge should someone have after taking a U.S. history course, just for example? Essentialists would say they need to know things like who the first president was, maybe important dates in court cases. This provides equity as it can be assumed that every student learned the same content because the attributes of the course are well laid out in a well-constructed curriculum. As an example, this is a snapshot of the state curriculum guide. Interestingly, it is the same standard discussed in our Faith, Freedom, and Public Schools module. It's a good example because it provides detail when teaching about Judaism. The essential knowledge guides teachers to explore the vocabulary and concepts included. This is an example of Common Core. As you can see, it doesn't retain all the details or the connective tissue that you saw in the previous curriculum that has been the guiding document for teaching history in Virginia for well over 15 years. On the next slide, you can see this is a blended example. Here, thematics are used to teach about religions of the world, resulting in a presentation to assess learning that the students would do. Chronology is not important, and neither are the details. Students are provided free rein to conduct their investigation and demonstrate what they know. Is this the best format for ensuring students grasp the course content? I think that's a big question that we all are faced with. Here in Virginia, we're at a crossroads. Most recently, I attended a Leaders Consortium meeting where we drafted our core values as it relates to curriculum. Because the state is getting ready to redo our curriculum, and there's been a push to change it and make it more like Common Core. Many argue that the current model simply contains too much information, which is interesting because it reminds me of a quote from one of my history professors not too long ago. If the Chinese can teach 4,000 years of their history, why can't we cover a fraction of that in comparable detail? This group is making recommendations to the state as to what it is our curriculum should embody. Among these are conceptual, student-centered, rooted in skills, based on multiple perspectives, place-based, and relevant to students' lives. What's missing from that? I mean, is it simple enough just to write these things down and then provide some thematic guidance to it? For example, if you are doing world religions, is it enough just to say, hey, compare and contrast these religions? Or does there need to be something more? In particular, content. I think when we start to blend and look at these, there has to be some of those bullets in place. If not, instruction can go astray, and we could lose some of those pivotal components that are necessary for students to understand and build upon, especially when it comes to chronology, as well as understanding concepts such as cause and effect. Even when we consider the Christian faith, there exist certain non-negotiables or essential elements. Schaeffer provides support to the essentialist argument. He explains that total truth rooted in the Creator's existence and in the Bible's teaching is a necessary part of learning within the context of the Christian faith. Schaeffer in paragraph 5. This attribute is an essential component or foundation of Christian pedagogy. By viewing the essentialist philosophy with a biblical lens, it is apparent that education, like faith, mandates a common foundation of beliefs. Essential ideals of Christianity include the Bible being the Word of God, the Ten Commandments, the Nicene Creed, the Seven Sacraments, and of course, the fundamental belief in salvation through Jesus Christ. Edgar expands on this when he explains the harshness and abstractiveness of modernism. I believe this final quote speaks to the overall aim of essentialism, building a foundation for students to be successful in the real world. Bagley understood the need to communicate the learning outcome of public education. His desire to improve the teaching profession and ensure all students have a right to an appropriate education speaks to the nature of education in a democracy. Thanks for listening to my presentation. I hope you have a blessed day. And these are my references. Again, images were provided through Google using copyright-free availability, and the video, again, was completed using Screencastify. Thank you.